So, hello everyone. Today we got our very own Rafael with us, who is, as you know, a CTS fellow, but also a PhD student right at the HCI group and researcher there. And yeah, he'll talk about perceptions of reality in the security context, but as you know, we'll talk a lot more about that. So, stage is yours.
Yeah. So hello and thank you for having me. It's always a great feeling to talk about one's own research because on the one hand you're very passionate about the topic and therefore love talking about it, but also I feel it's a good reality check, especially for young researchers like me, to see how well you can explain your topic to people who might be a bit less passionate about it, but also who hopefully know less about it than you yourself. And yeah, so I have to admit the title of my talk, Perception versus Reality, is the illusion of security, why we erroneously trust technologies in the age of the AI revolution, is the exact same title I used for my PhD proposal, which I got accepted by the Austrian Academy of Sciences. So I'm very happy about it, and special thanks to them and in a broader sense to the Austrian taxpayers for funding my research. But in the course of actually working with the proposal, the title changed a bit, or what I'm currently working on is a position paper, why we actually need to talk more about perception when it comes to IT security, because just because technology is safe, it doesn't mean that people necessarily feel safe while using it. And so in a very broad sense, my topic is perceived versus actual security. And as we researchers all love shiny graphs, I created one myself to actually explain those two terms with examples. So on the x-axis we have actual security, and on the y-axis we have perceived security. And the actual security of the technology can be low or high, so insecure or secure, and the same goes for the perceived security of technology. And now I added a bunch of different technologies here, so please note that the position of them is completely arbitrary. But what this graph should show is that every technology has a specific level of actual technological security and a level of perceived security. And what we as technology developers always aim at is that technology that is actually secure is also perceived as such. And technology that is insecure should also be perceived as such. So the perceived security and the actual technological security should align. What is rather bad is if a technology which is actually secure is perceived as insecure. Because, for example, if you think about unlocking your smartphone with a fingerprint based on tests and experiences and also on the technology itself, the fingerprint is way more secure than compared to a 4-digit passcode. But if people don't feel secure when using the fingerprint on their smartphone, for example, if they are afraid that a company has their fingerprint and can do malicious stuff with it, they might not use it and feel less secure because they don't use technology. But what is even worse is the technology that is actually insecure is perceived as secure by people and therefore used in a false sense of security. So having explained that, I want to talk about the actual technical security with which IT security researchers often deal. First of all, it is rather objective, it is measurable, it is comparable, and also to some degree provable. I will provide an example in just a few seconds. And also, in some cases, certifiable by different certification authorities and even more. So if you think, for example, about an encryption algorithm, we know how long it takes for it to encrypt stuff and to decrypt stuff. In this case, the encryption is very fast and therefore easy for us to handle, and the decryption should be very, very slow. And we have mathematical proofs which can prove how secure an encryption algorithm is, and therefore we can estimate its actual security rate. So perceived security, on the other hand, is a bit difficult because it's highly subjective. What I feel is secure might be totally differ from what you feel, or what you feel. And therefore, we ask ourselves how to measure it, which is not really easy because it's subjective. And then in a follow-up question, how to compare it. And that is an important in that context, and we have seen on the graph, is how well does the perceived security that you or I have align with the actual security of the technology. And what makes things even more difficult is that the people in this room and also probably the people watching on Zoom are very tech-savvy people. We are researching with technology, about technology, and we know technology very well. But as this lecture series all happens in a responsible computing context, it is our responsibility as researchers to also think about people who are less or not tech-savvy at all and how they perceive technologies and use them accordingly, and therefore how to protect them from a wrong sense of security, for example. And a field which is often, or which is very prominent when it comes about when it comes to security and people, is usable security. And usable security is a research field which is concerned with, according to the definition I quote here, delivering the required levels of security by also ensuring effectiveness, efficiency, and user satisfaction. And I want to quickly motivate why I feel that we need more than just usable security. So, as we have seen with this definition and also with the name, usable security is mainly concerned with usability. And therefore, it deals with the question how easy and intuitive are specific tools or measures to use, and how can we improve usability of such tools and measures, and how can we measure usability, compare it, and so on. So, yeah. But the question I want to raise here is, if people still feel insecure, what does usability even help us when people still won't use specific measures or don't feel good when they use those measures? And how can we overall improve the feeling of security besides just providing the visibility? And for that, I want to quickly compare those two terms. So usable security is, as we have seen by the question, rather technology-centered. So it mainly asks how can you make technology secure and usable at the same time. And perceived security, on the other hand, is human-centered. And so even if the technology is secure and usable, do people perceive it as such? And what makes them perceive the technology in a certain way? And to not answer this question, but motivate why it is necessary, I now present 5 use cases with which I deal within my thesis, or will deal within my thesis. So the first one, and the most elaborated one yet, are cookie banners. So we all have to use them when we visit websites, and we are probably all annoyed by them. And just very quickly, cookie banners differ in the design, their layout, the content, the wording, and also in, and I highlight that because a study is set up with that, specifically with the option set. So how, for which options you have to click on a cookie banner, for example, accept all, reject all, and so on. And even more different, I'm quite sure if you think about them, we will come up with some more. And currently in this use case, and we did a vignette study, so we created different vignettes. Those are a representation of websites, rather abstract ones, and analyzed how the different option sets and the different wording makes a difference in user choices, and found that it is very significant which options users have, and that the wording is almost irrelevant because most people apparently do not even read it. Yeah, the second use case we deal with is explainability of data collection and data processing. This we explored already in a project back in 2023, and the Trend project, we explored that with a business partner, the Produce GmbH, who are creating a platform where you can order microelectronics based on themes you come up with, and then they mix and match and kind of produce it for you. And in that context, we already wrote a publication which was published at TU last year. and which basically showed us that people actually care about the data that is processed, but they don't care so much if it is not their own data, but company data. And in a nutshell, this use case asks the question whether or not the knowledge of data collection and usage changes how we act as field towards a tool or a provider. And the initial result that we had based on the paper is that it actually does make a difference. The next use case I call Spam GPT, and basically with the rise of AI and even generative AI even more in the last couple of years, it is way easier for malicious actors to actually create realistic spam emails which have correct wording and grammar and a coherent layout and design, which might very well almost look like the one a company uses. And currently we are developing such a tool with students, so a tool which is compared to ChatGPT and other tools in place, really focused on creating very, very realistic spam emails. And what we want to investigate with that tool is how using such a tool changes the perception of spam emails, of the participants, and how easy it actually is for non-tech-savvy people to create spam, and therefore how dangerous this threat actually is in the future. The fourth use case also deals with emails and with tracking emails, and for that we differentiate between different email types. So we all know text-only emails, which many of us might use. Then rich text emails where we actually have layout, like in the Word document, for example, or HTML emails, which are already very website-esque, so they are almost looking at website, and a lot of companies use those in order to have their corporate identity also represented in the email. And the question we ask here is, what has how much influence on how emails are perceived by people? So is it the grammar an email contains? Is it the design it has? Is it the structure? Is it the content? And other factors. So what makes an email perceived as secure by people? And the fifth use case, sorry, I just want to quickly present by repeating the two research questions, because this is the least developed use case until now. And those questions, so we want to also investigate not only email security and perception, but also messenger security and perception, because this is also a communication way all of us use. And the questions we want to investigate here is, how aware are users of the different grades of security on different communication technologies, and how are those perceived? And in that context, what has the most influence on whether people trust a certain messaging services or technology or not? So, and those 5 use cases are individually already very interesting in my opinion, but what makes a topic work or a thesis work is how those are brought together. And the overarching question is how to measure, assess, compare perceived security in those use cases. For example, for the cookie use case, how the different cookie banners influence the perceived security of a website. With regard to emails, how does the perception of spam change when dealing with Spam GPT, and what makes an email trustworthy or lets people feel secure about it? And how secure do people feel actually in different messaging services or messaging technologies? And how does the explanation of data collection change how people feel and perceive a service or a tool they use? And that actually already is my talk. So thank you. I open the floor now for questions, and just so that you graphical reminders here of what I talked about in the last couple of minutes. And on the end, you also see my references. But now I'll go back to the question slide. So
thank you very much. So we can have questions in the room, but also the people who are online, just feel free to either unmute and speak. This should work, or also just leave something in the chat. I would have a question that just came up. So maybe I just start with this one. So you have this, for instance, STEM GPT, right? So I've seen it now a lot that when we do research, we're kind of developing something malicious in order to kind of reverse engineer basically and the issue. So has it ever kind of, did something or somebody say something about this kind of approach? Because I see very often in my own work where they would say, you're developing basically a weapon to then prevent using that weapon. So since we're in responsible computing, so I think this is a relevant issue.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and also something you have to consider when ethically evaluating a proposal you hand in. So the point why I feel that the good outweighs the bad is that it actually is very easy to develop such a tool. Students can do it, and obviously students have a lot of knowledge in computer science, but based on the tool chain we have and based on the training data we have by all the STEM emails we receive on a daily basis, it is not very difficult to develop such tools. And therefore, it actually is way more important to assess how dangerous such a tool is and which prerequisites have to be met in order for such a tool to work. Because even if you just use ChatGPT and you tell ChatGPT, yeah, I want to create an email, and it should look like that. I really like Apple's design, so please do that. And then you take, for example, an email and ask ChatGPT, yeah, is this spam or correct the wording or whatever. So you can even use tools which have protections in place rather easily to create them in that way. So obviously we have to ethically consider that and shouldn't make this people online, for example. But still, I think just the knowledge on how dangerous this actually is and how easy it is to develop such a tool and to use such a tool is way more important than to just not do it because it's ethical. Yeah, we should do it responsibly, obviously, but it's not that only we have the knowledge to do it, and therefore open the box of the Pandora, or how you say it. So, yeah.
And so in this context, so you're developing, but what's happening kind of after? Do you plan to also kind of then, I don't know, develop even counter mechanisms, or is it more kind of on the practical side of things that you go, well, somebody should research it further, or is it part of your actually?
Well, the technical background is not really part of my research because I mainly look at the human side of things. But the usage of the tool for a study is why we actually develop it. So where we want to evaluate how easy it is for lay people who don't know anything about HTML emails, about emails in general, and how the structure is and how the protocol works. How easy it is for them to actually send spam, which is not detected by the spam system. Or in the first step to create spam and then let the spam be assessed by other people, and if they detect that it is spam or not. So that is what we want to do.
Any questions from you or online?
Yes, I would be interested on which stage you are in your thesis. Do you already have some results for the question? And also the question, do you have specific age groups you target for this?
So, yeah, thank you. The first use case on cookie banners, we actually already did a prolific study. In there, the only demographic requirement we had was that the people are fluent in English because the survey was set up in English. So we got, I think, we had 150 participants and 130 of the answers were valid, based on the fact that this prolific is a website with matches researchers with study participants, so you pay for a certain number of participants, and then they fill out your survey, and if the data they fill out is valid, and they want to second then they get paid. And yeah, based on the fact that it is an online service, we had a demographic of rather young people, like students or in their early 30s, but it is not that we targeted a specific demographic group by now, which is more interesting to us is how non-tech savvy people act in that context, because Tech-savvy people we all have accessible around here in the university context, we know how they interact with technology. And yeah, therefore the part where non-tech-savvy people are interacting with those runners, for example, is more interesting stuff. And based on, so like the stage I'm currently at is that the first use case in cookie runners is basically done, where we are now trying to get the results published. Maybe there is a follow-up study with more concrete examples where we might even look into eye tracking technologies to see where people actually look at first when they deal with the key runner. But yeah, that is done, and the other use cases are currently in development. So the SAM GPT is currently being developed in the email use case, and the messenger use case is left as is for later. And the data collection use case is done in a very narrow way because we only look at it from a business perspective, and there we might want to look at it in a broader scale.
I like the age question in a way, because I mean, from the research on misinformation and these kind of things, usually all the polls, at least in Austria, they specifically target people over the age of 44, right? So there's some certain bias in that. So I was wondering whether in your research you found kind of similar things, that specific age groups are actually more vulnerable to this.
We did a correlation analysis with the cookie use case and didn't find a significant correlation, but that might very well be just because we had a lot of students as our participants, and therefore it might not be very representative. But for the future, we might repeat a study like that with more precise demographic requirements. So to maybe then find out how different age groups or how tech-savvy people are and things like that. Because we also did not really find a significance between tech-savviness and non-tech-savviness in our results.
You might have touched on this in your presentation, but how do you then define tech-savviness? Is it kind of related to education, or how does the measurement or the scale kind of roughly look like?
Yeah, that's actually very difficult because we can look into education. So we asked the question whether they had computer science as part of their education, at which stage they have that, because if you have computer science in high school for 2 hours a week, it's different than having a computer science bachelor or master, obviously. And what we used as a measure on how well they know about cookies and the technical context is that we let them describe what a cookie in this context is, and then rate their confidence in the description, whether they are very confident about the description or not. Obviously, we cannot account for people just asking ChatGPT what a cookie is, but also because it is anonymous, they don't really have the motivation to actually pretend, because pretending costs them more time than to figure it out. So that was our initial idea of assessing that, but assessing the tech-savviness is a whole different story, which makes everything we do a lot more difficult because it's not an objective measure.
Right, yeah, so there are no kind of established measures that everyone is using in this area.
In our initial research, we didn't find very specific questionnaires. We actually, in the project, besides my thesis, we had some sort of digital competence assessment, and that was also not a very often used questionnaire, which was actually developed by Fraunhofer. So it was a very new measure we tried out there. We didn't follow up on that for this study because it was too late too long, because it's a very detailed questionnaire. But yeah, overall, at least to my knowledge, there is no holy grail of assessing tech-savviness, especially because being tech-savvy in one aspect doesn't mean you're tech-savvy in another aspect. A lot of people can configure their computers to a very, very individual degree and still cannot do any programming. So they might be tech-savvy people, but they are not programmers. And as it has so many aspects, it's very difficult to assess that.
Yeah. If there are more questions from the room, or in case there are some online, otherwise I think I would thank you once more for your presentation. And I'll stop the recording. And yeah, thanks for the people online for joining us today.